Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with The Search for Tyranny. We are diving back into the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership, and we are desperately searching for the tyranny that we are promised. We have found a few promising things, and one of them was contained in the CIA, and one of them might be contained in today because this is a continuation of the intelligence agencies. And this is part in particular that we are starting with is dealing with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA. This is Project 2025, the recommendations that are being uh, asked for from the conservative president. It is not a guarantee. We live in a republic and we don't even know who the president will be, much less that this will be enacted in the way that it is put out. I am reading this aloud so that I understand it and that so some other people can hear it and understand it too. I will read through it and then I will discuss the parts that I feel are relevant on the other side. If that's not your cup of tea, that is absolutely understandable. Have a blessed day. For the rest of you, let's dive in. This is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. This is a continuation of yesterday. A future president should understand the importance of FISA while also seeking reforms and accountability for any abuses of its authorities. When discussing FISA and what changes may need to be made, it is important to note and recognize that there are stark differences among the individual FISA authorities. Section 702 of FISA, for example, allows the IC to target foreign terrorists, spies, hackers, and other bad actors, but only if they are non-U.S. persons, when their communications pass through the United States. While this authority may lapse if Congress does not resolve the issue by the end of 2023, Section 702 should be understood to be an essential tool in the fight against terrorism, malicious cyber actors, and Chinese espionage. These are two major national security priorities for an incoming president, and it is imperative that the need to use properly maintained and accountable authorities to counter these challenges be recognized. Section 702 is a vital program that often provides a lion's share of intelligence used in the President's Daily Brief, PVD. An independent review by the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, PCLOB, found that it was not abused. Nevertheless, Congress should review the PCLOB's upcoming 2023 report to help it determine whether any reforms or codification of recent administrative changes and FISA processes are needed. Other authorities in Title I and Title III, often referred to as traditional FISA, have elicited valid concerns about the politicization of intelligence collection authority in recent years. When seeking surveillance of Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, for example, the FBI and the Department of Justice concealed vital information from a specialized court and submitted applications that were riddled with errors. An incoming conservative president should consider reforms designed to prevent future partisan abuses of national security authority. A package of strong provisions to protect against such partisanship might include stiffer penalties and mandatory investigations when intelligence leaks are aimed at domestic political targets, tighter controls on otherwise lawful intercepts that also collect the communication of domestic political figures, an express prohibition on politically motivated use of intelligence authorities, and reforms to improve the accountability of the Justice Department and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. To keep intelligence credentials from being used for partisan purposes, former high-ranking intelligence officials who retain a clearance should remain subject to the Hatch Act after they leave government to deter them from tying their political stands or activism to their continuing privilege of access to classified government information. The IC should be prohibited from monitoring so-called domestic disinformation. Such activity can easily slip into suppression of an opposition party's speech, is corrosive to First Amendment protections, and raises questions about impartiality when the IC chooses not to act. Okay, so I am not so naive as to believe that we do not need at times to surveil domestic people, political or not. I do believe that it should never be left up to one person, even one judge, in the particulars of a president, regardless of who the president is. There should at least be a tribunal of federally appointed judges drawn at random who are served the duty of doing that. Like, there should be some transparency effort outside of this one guy said okay. Anyone, anyone caught abusing the system should face the absolute harshest punishment possible under the law. Anyone caught violating intentionally the civil rights of other people should be considered the same as a slaver, in my opinion. If you are intentionally slandering someone with the intention of deceiving the public, you should face some severe problems. Severe problems. And when it comes to the national interest in the manner that what happened during the 2016 presidential campaign with the Russian disinformation hoax that came from the CIA and the FISA courts, there should be the harshest of penalties possible inflicted upon those found guilty. That was an intentional attempt to subvert the will of the people of the Republic of the United States of America. Next up, China-focused changes, reforms, and resources. The term whole of government is all too frequently overused, but in responding to the generational threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party, that is exactly the approach that our national security apparatus should adopt. CIA Director William Burns has formally established a China Mission Center focused on these efforts, but it can only be successful only if it is given the necessary personnel, cross-community collaboration, and resources. That is uncertain at this point, and just how seriously the organization has taken the staffing of the center is unclear. A critical strategic question for an incoming administration and IC leaders will be how, when, and with whom do we share our classified intelligence? Understanding when to pass things to liaisons and for what purpose will be vital to outmaneuvering China in the intelligence sphere. Questions for a president will include: what is our overarching conception of the adversarial relationship and competition? How does intelligence sharing fit into that conception? Some members of Congress have said that intelligence relationships such as the Five Eyes should be expanded to include other allies in the Asia Pacific in, for example, the Nine Eyes framework. This fails to take into account the fact that any blanket expansion would necessarily involve protecting the sources and methods of a larger and quite possibly more diverse group of member countries that might or might not have congruent interests. That being said, however, a future conservative president should consider what resources and information sharing relationships could be included in an ad hoc or quasi-formal intelligence expansion, for example with a Quad, among nations trying to counter the threat from China. Significant technology, language skills, and financial intelligence resources are needed to counter China's capabilities. The IC was caught flat-footed by the recent discovery of China's successful test of a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile. No longer can America's information and technological dominance be assumed. China's gains and intense focus on emerging technologies have taken it in some areas that from being a near-peer competitor to probably being ahead of the United States. China's centralized government allocates endless resources, sometimes inefficiently, to its strategic Made in China 2025 and military apparatuses which combine government, military, and private sector activities on quantum information sciences and technologies, artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, biotechnologies, and advanced robotics. The IC must do more than understand these advancements. It must rally non-government and allied partners to inspire unified action to counter them. In addition, to combat China's economic espionage, authorities and loopholes in the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, will have to be examined and addressed in conjunction with the Attorney General. Many issues within our broader government can be tied back to a more general congressional understanding of the threat due to the compartmentalization of committee jurisdictions and the responsibilities of executive agencies to brief on the nature of the threat. Broader committee jurisdictions should receive additional intelligence from IC agencies as necessary to inform China's unique and more comprehensive threat across layers of the U.S. government bureaucracy and economy. Former DNI John Ratcliffe increased the intelligence budget as it related to China by 20%. When people ask me why I did that, he explained in an interview, I say, because no one would let me increase it by 40%. I had an $85 billion combined annual budget for both the National Intelligence Program and Military Intelligence Program. My perspective was, whatever we're spending on countering China, it isn't enough. From an intelligence standpoint, the need to understand China's motivations, capabilities, and intent will be of paramount importance to a future conservative president. It is therefore also of paramount importance that the whole of government be rowing together. There's not a whole lot there for me to expound upon, right? We do need to fund counterintelligence. We do need to know the enemy's capabilities. That is a given for a sovereign nation state. Not even for the detriment of the others, but simply for the protection of yourself. If there are technological advances being made in China that we don't have, it is because we have allowed it to be stolen from us. Chinese communists cannot come up with things on their own. It's not possible to flourish in that manner under communism. There is a reason why it falls apart and falls away. If it was not for the fact that they can indeed come at will and steal our stuff, then they wouldn't even be a threat about anything. They can reverse engineer things because we send it there to be made. If we were taking care of ourselves in the way that they are trying to take care of themselves, we would not have to worry about them. Instead, we spend our time trying to bring freedom to places that don't want freedom. Next up, National Counterintelligence and Security Center, NCSC. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, SSCI, has taken a keen interest in possibly updating the codified language underpinning much of the nation's counterintelligence apparatus. Spy versus spy threats continue to exist, but the rise of China and, to an extent, Russia's machinations move beyond the governmental sphere to technological, economic, supply chain, cyber, academic, state, and local espionage threats at a level our country has never seen. The asymmetric threat includes cyber, non-traditional collection, and issues involving legitimate businesses serving as collection platforms. Barring statutory changes that could occur before 2025, a future conservative president should further empower and resource the IC by executive order or through suggested changes in the Counterintelligence Enhancement Act, CEA, of 2002. NCSC was given some authority for outreach efforts on behalf of the IC for counterintelligence education, insider threats, and broader U.S. government best practices, but there remains significant deltas between Title 50 and non-Title 50 entities' protections. Primary operational elements should remain at the FBI and CIA, with the Bureau and NCSC collaborating on non-governmental outreach. While there is no need to create a separate agency, a future president and DNI should amplify NCSC's authorities and roles with respect to counterintelligence strategy, policy, outreach, and governance, including supporting necessary joint duty assignments, JDA, for FBI and CIA personnel. At the same time, The FBI requires significant additional resources and legal authorities to fulfill its statutory role as the lead operational counterintelligence agency, in dealing with the ever-growing threats posed by our adversaries. The CEA should be updated to include foreign espionage efforts aimed at universities. Corporate America, technology companies, research institutions, and academia must be willing, educated partners in this generational fight to protect our national security interest, economic interest, national sovereignty, and intellectual property, as well as the broader rules-based order, all while avoiding the tendency to cave to the left-wing activists and investors who ignore the China threat and increasingly dominate the corporate world. Reinstitution of the National Security Higher Education Advisory Board and the National Security Business Alliance Council should be prioritized with leadership from the NCSC, the FBI, or a combination of both entities. When the CCP steals at least $400 billion to $600 billion in intellectual property each year, it is time to devote some strategic thinking to exactly how and to what degree counterintelligence efforts can help to protect America's commercial endeavors. If Chinese strategic technology gains are happening almost entirely in transnational commercial space, for example, and the private sector is also gathering and analyzing some critical intelligence, these essential data points should assist in a national level counterintelligence efforts. The NCSC was created in the aftermath of 9/11 as the Terrorist Threat Integration Center, TTIC, which later became the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, pursuant to President George W. Bush's Executive Order 13354. The NCTC was an organization of approximately 3 dozen detainees from across the U.S. government with a mandate to integrate counterterrorism intelligence and missions, including terrorist screening. Eventually, in November of 2014, the Director of National Intelligence established NCSC by combining the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive with the Center for Security Evaluation, the Special Security Center, and the National Insider Threat Task Force to effectively integrate and align counterintelligence and security mission areas under a single organizational construct. The Director of NCSC serves to support in the DNI's role as Security Executive Agent, SEC-EA, to develop, implement, oversee, and integrate personnel security initiatives throughout the U.S. government. NCSC has added value in such areas as fusing cross-community intelligence for terrorism watch-listing purposes and improving information sharing while carrying roughly half in the overall cadre for the ODNI. An incoming administration should focus NCTC on integrative tasks, many of which cannot be carried out elsewhere in the IC, but should not use personnel and resources for redundant analysis that duplicate the work of other IC entities as the FBI and CIA. I don't have a lot to add to this, right? This is not my area of expertise. I believe in the maximum amount of freedom, the maximum amount of liberty, and the maximum amount of leave me alone. And so, for a large part, that's all I want. If you can deter people from entering me, that is always a bonus. If you can do that constitutionally without spying too much on domestic issues, I am down with it. We definitely have bad actors out there. I don't particularly care for the focus on any one nation. We should be preparing to be better than everybody, to not have to fight anybody, but to be able to fight anybody, to know what they have going on, but not to interfere unless it is dire. Additional areas for reform. Analytical integrity. The tradecraft of intelligence analysis is mostly a collection of lessons learned over decades about what works and does not work in a profession whose high stakes work is performed by thousands, but that also bears little outside scrutiny and provides few metrics by which to gauge success or failure on a regular basis. These lessons have accumulated from the perceived misuse of intelligence by consumers, as was the case with respect to war related assessments in the Johnson and Bush administrations. Failures, such as the failures to warn of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the specific threat of 9/11. Successes in piecing together tactical and often technical puzzles, such as estimates of Iranian nuclear program maturation, and strategic victories, such as anticipating critical geopolitical developments that have been years in the making. Historically, this tradecraft has been passed on in the form of unwritten rules learned on the job and in agency specific training classes. But increasingly, since the intelligence reforms of 2004, they have been codified IC wide under the direction of the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Mission Integration. A RAND study of U.S. intelligence tradecraft notes that the vast majority of intelligence analysis and the vast majority of intelligence analysts reside outside the Central Intelligence Agency and do work that is tactical, operational, and current. The study goes on to note that the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, has as many analysts as the CIA has, and that the National Security Agency, NSA, has several times as many analysts, and as does the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, indicating both the breadth of the IC's technical collection and its emphasis both on the developing analyst who can interpret secret human or technical intelligence in quick turnaround pieces, and on countering tactical asymmetrical threats like terrorism. During the Cold War, however, it was a more balanced analytical focus with greater emphasis on strategic intelligence issues as a means of outcompeting the Soviet Union. This kind of analysis deals not only in secrets but also in mysteries, making founded but ultimately unknowable predictions about future actions by a competitor or adversary. The tradecraft necessary to succeed in strategic analysis requires substantive regional and topical expertise developed over the years to supplement experience in the daily collection and understanding of secrets. Institutionally, it also requires that agencies' analytic processes be open to discussion, debate, and dissent, because analysts must work together to describe a probable range of future outcomes and warn about unproven current threats rather than using the collection to solve a single puzzle with a definitive answer. Regarding its mission to follow longer term issues, the IC is falling short in resourcing and in openness to dissenting opinions, which, if taken seriously, can help responsible officials respond more effectively to threats and threat actors. The IC Analytic Ombudsman has expressed concern that hyperpartisanship has threatened to undermine the foundations of our republic, penetrating even into the intelligence community. For example, the Ombudsman noted in a report on the IC's handling of election threat analysis in 2020 that, in his view, CIA officials had deliberately downplayed dissenting views and coordination comments expressed by experts at the National Intelligence Council and elsewhere who felt that there was evidence of Beijing's intent to exert at least some influence on the 2020 elections, as opposed to the consensus view that Beijing did not interfere in U.S. elections. Senior CIA analysts and leaders made it difficult to have a healthy analytic conversation in a confrontational environment, while violating multiple official IC tradecraft standards. Not allowing dissent or considering its alternatives, the CIA exercised undue influence on intelligence. Subsequent exposure of China linked online influence and the FBI's warnings about continued efforts through the 2020 midterms highlight the folly of undue certainty without consideration of alternatives. On election influence and other controversial issues, such as the origin of the pandemic, analysts at the most powerful intelligence agencies have increasingly tended to use the leeway they have been given to insert their political views into their work in order to influence, if possibly even control, the analytic process. They do this in ways that attempt to squash dissent and impair the creation of a culture in which the entrenched views are challenged and unpopular analytical lines can survive, or not, according to their merits. To help the United States and its leaders to outcompete China across multifaceted societal, economic, military, and technological threats, the IC's capability to conduct strategic intelligence analysis that is relevant to policy makers in both parties must be rebuilt and strengthened. Because Beijing may be a peer or even exceed U.S. capabilities in some areas, the post 9/11 analytic focus on quick turnaround secrets is not good enough. Strategic planning informed by intelligence must take place for the United States to stay ahead of whatever new threats China may pose. An incoming conservative president will have the opportunity to signal the demand for such strategic products and prioritize their production through communications to intelligence leaders and formal mechanisms such as shifting priorities within the National Intelligence Priority Framework and structuring the president's daily brief. The incoming DNI should also emphasize implementing the recommendations in the Ombudsman's report, especially regarding objectivity, the inclusion of dissenting viewpoints, and more serious efforts to hold senior leaders accountable for back-channel attempts to change or suppress analytic views. Accounting for the long history of intelligence failures and surprises, an incoming conservative president must appreciate the ambiguity, complexity, limits, and assumptions inherent in intelligence assessments. Intelligence often deals with the human dimension in complex decision systems within a foreign country or organization, and this makes consistently accurate predictions difficult, if not impossible, to develop. Seeing something and understanding what you are seeing are two different things, so a president should consistently and patiently press the IC about its potential biases, assumptions, methodology, and sourcing. With regard to election threat analysis and politically controversial topics, agency leaders should take seriously the Ombudsman's admonition that we need to maintain tradecraft standards across all countries and topics by ensuring that equitable standards apply across all foreign threat actors. And analysis should be put forward without regard to domestic political ramifications of intelligence conclusions. I agree with everything that was said there, right? There was not a whole lot for me to add. Again, I'm blocking this out so that I can see it when it transitions, right? If I don't have a whole lot to add, still need to put the timestamps in. Most people aren't watching this, and if you are, I truly do appreciate you hanging around. We are learning a little bit. There's not a whole lot for me to add. I'm just gaining some knowledge, and hopefully you are too. Let's dive back in, and we're going to talk about the obligation to share and real-time auditing capability. The federal government has made admirable progress in recent years by being more forward-leaning in sharing cyber threat intelligence with private sector partners and the public, emphasizing that the protective nature of such information is of value only if put into the right hands at the right time. So, since critical infrastructure and services are overwhelmingly owned, managed, and defended by the private sector in the United States, there has been an increasing emphasis on declassifying intelligence and sharing actionable information with private sector partners, often through industry-specific information sharing and analysis centers, ISACs. Regional meetings of government and private sector experts called InfraGuard, run by the FBI, direct public notification from the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and, increasingly, the NSA. and more discreet one-on-one engagements led by the collecting agencies. These programs properly recognize the private sector's role in providing cybersecurity for Americans. In practice, however, the intelligence shared by the U.S. government through these venues is too often already known or no longer relevant by the time it makes its way through the downgrade process for sharing. In addition, government shared information often needs to take advantage of the opportunity to provide context, such as attribution, trends, and size of the observed cyber problem. As warranted, additional context should be provided to the private sector as a matter of routine. To continue improving the U.S. government's ability to defend the country's most vital networks, the IC must adopt an obligation to share policy process, including the capacity to write to release intelligence products whereby newly discovered technical indicators, targeting, and other intelligence relevant to cyber defense are automatically provided either to the public or to targeted entities within 48 hours of their collection, which is how counterterrorism intelligence has been managed for years when it comes to a duty to warn. Under this policy, agency heads should still have the flexibility to withhold intelligence for operational or counterintelligence reasons, but would need to report regularly to Congress on the number of and justification for exceptions. This policy would make sharing intelligence and defending networks the default, as it already is in the rest of the cybersecurity community outside the IC, and to improve the quality, relevance, and timeliness of defensive information while ensuring accountability for top leaders when they must withhold this information. One of the most significant challenges within the IC is presented by the need to share information promptly among the 18 elements of the intelligence enterprise. The only long-term solution to the understandable tension between the need to share information and the need to protect intelligence sources and methods is a robust, real-time auditing capability that electronically flags unauthorized access. Under an identity management program system with a real-time audit, even the most sensitive information acquired by America's intelligence agencies can be shared, and the access to and use of that information are appropriately monitored. Establishing a real-time auditing capability is essential to decreasing the risk for the heads of intelligence agencies and meeting their statutory requirements to ensure that they protect sources and methods associated with the classified information according to their agencies collect. I'm going to go ahead and run this one into the next one. Overclassification. There is a broad consensus across the U.S. government and among stakeholders that the system for classifying, declassifying, and otherwise marking and handling sensitive information is at a crossroads. Exorbitant amounts of classified data are created daily, and agency personnel often mistakenly choose classification as the default selection to ensure national security. At the same time, the effectiveness of downgraded and carefully declassified information to support foreign policy efforts has been borne out in, for example, alerting the broader world of Russia's buildup and likely plans for its invasion of Ukraine. Two executive orders principally govern how the U.S. government handles classified and sensitive information. Executive Order 13526, Classified National Security Information, issued in 2009, prescribes the classification levels and procedures for declassification. Executive Order 13556, Controlled Unclassified Information, issued in 2010, aimed to establish a uniform program for managing all unclassified information that requires safeguarding or dissemination controls. The current system for declassifying classified national security information, CNSI, is extraordinarily analog, requiring experts' review of individual records. Declassification policies are based on human review of paper and need to contemplate and handle the proliferation and volume of digital records created by agencies. The U.S. government will soon reach the point at which manual review is impossible. The declassification of CNSI should support key U.S. national security objectives, reflect mission priorities, and not serve solely as a necessary procedural function. Reforms should include tighter definitions and greater specificity for categories of information requiring protection, more stringent policies to effect significant reductions in the number of original classification authorities, OCAs, stricter accountability measures at the OCA level for more detailed and security classification guides, enhanced metrics for accuracy of classification, a general simplification of the overall system for the benefit of users. On the back end, an OD&I run declassification process that is faster, nimbler, default to automated, and larger scale should be a priority. Additionally, investments in IT are required to deal with the growing volumes of CNSI collected and produced in the digital age, along with many years' worth of existing analog and digital holdings that could provide valuable historical insights. An incoming administration needs to explore options to prioritize funding for innovation in declassification management. For example, by establishing a budget line item specifically for the modernization of declassification or designating funding for a program classification management as a special interest item. The administration will also need to transition to using technology, including tools and services for big data, which provide a robust electronic record repository, making information within and across agencies easier to organize and locate, and facilitating more rapid review and release capabilities for records of emerging interest. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, which, when incorporated into existing business practices, enables machine interpretation of unstructured text and data, applies decision support technology to enable more consistent classification decisions, and expedites reviews between agencies, and expansion of commercial cloud services, which facilitate the rapid testing and deployment of new tools and technologies. However, technology is not a panacea. Human expertise in information holding and routine validation of the technology will always be necessary. With or without machine assistance, agencies will require more people with more varied skill sets to improve their ability to meet electronic records era's classification and declassification demands and serve an incoming administration's goals. Classified and declassified information have been a very big point of talking in the last 5 years for sure. Julian Assange is one example. That's been over a decade. Then you have two separate presidents and a vice president, and you have senators and all these people with classified data where it shouldn't be. I am of the opinion, and it is merely an opinion, that most classified data could probably be let loose. That is not to say specifics about operations like giving names and locations of specific agents and their methods being employed currently. But things that have happened in the past and no one is involved with now, we should have at least somebody looking at. We should have the clearest records possible. They should be honest and accurate. They should be reviewed often and well, and they should be exposed to the light and the public as much as humanly possible. Part of that will be AI driven. It has to be. But there is a severe threat in allowing AI to make decisions about things. Even things as simple as, should this paper be declassified or not? Because sometimes the not is more important than the should. Next up, broader U.S. government and IC intelligence needs. Increasingly, conflicts among U.S. adversaries such as China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are conducted in the realms of technology and finance. This challenge requires new tools, authorities, and technological expertise across the U.S. government, particularly at the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, and the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, which is housed at the Treasury Department. An incoming conservative president should task his DNI and Secretary of Commerce with increasing coordination, the resources needed for BIS and SCIF capacity, the proper and necessary intelligence sharing to counter the activities of multifaceted adversaries such as China. This would include additional work with private sector expertise, granting clearances to niche sector experts and United States citizen commercial and financial partners as needed. Cover in the digital age. Even in the public domain, it is becoming increasingly clear that protecting the identities of undercover intelligence officers is difficult in the digital age. The truth is that as our daily activities are conducted predominantly in the digital domain, our antiquated system for providing cover to undercover officers has lagged woefully behind the threat from foreign adversaries. The DIA, CIA, and FBI are increasingly aware of this threat and are devoting resources to the problem. Their back office infrastructure, however, is such that they are still using methods for providing cover from decades past that put valuable intelligence officers at unnecessary risk. How intelligence officers and their families are taught to use smartphones and social media, travel, conduct banking, and take and share pictures, even how and when they are paid, can make it difficult to protect identities. Legends, fake backstories, and identities are often weak, incomplete, and unable to stand up to a basic Google search. Officers operating under non-official cover are offered less and even less protection and training to help them succeed. In addition, ubiquitous technical surveillance, I don't know why that was so hard, UTS techniques being refined by technologies emanating from the regimes in China and Russia will continue to be highly challenging for intelligence officers. An incoming administration will need to double down on resourcing and training so that members of the IC will have the expertise they need to operate clandestinely and successfully against hard targets. Privacy Shield. For many years, the European Union has tried to force the U.S. companies operating in Europe to follow its data privacy regulations. Misleading claims in the 2013 Snowden leaks destroyed the initial safe harbor framework that allowed American companies to transfer data across the Atlantic. Its successor, the Privacy Shield framework, was struck down by European courts on the grounds that it provides insufficient protections for EU citizens against hypothetical U.S. government surveillance. Those same European courts exempted the intelligence services of EU member states from the standards applied to the U.S., suggesting that trade protectionism may be the real motive behind data privacy regulations. In 2022, the Biden administration negotiated a new agreement, the Transatlantic Data Privacy Framework, intended to withstand European legal challenges. Given the fate of its predecessors, it is not certain that it will survive. Executive Order 14086, Enhancing Safeguards for United States Signals Intelligence Activities, implements this new framework by attempting to align signals intelligence collection practices with European privacy regulations. At most, the executive order changes will be helpful to support for the framework in the future European litigation. At worst, they could throw sand in the gears of important intelligence programs. An incoming conservative president should reset Europe's expectations. Brussels has always arbitraged the difference between being a military ally against, for example, Russia, and conducting a full-blown trade conflict with the United States. Restrictions on data exports have been part of the trade conflict, but now they could seriously harm our military and intelligence capabilities. Moreover, restrictions on U.S. intelligence collection hurt the Europeans themselves, especially as the United States shares unprecedented amounts of intelligence on Russia's invasion of Ukraine with Europeans. Europe is telling the United States to meet intelligence oversight standards that no European country meets. At the same time, exports of data to China are unexamined and, so far, free from legal challenges. That violates World Trade Organization agreements as an arbitrary and discriminatory data protection standard. It is a betrayal by a nominally allied jurisdiction. European court rulings that struck down prior data privacy frameworks were grounded not in constitutional law but in a treaty among European nations. If the EU accepted an international agreement that data may flow to the United States under more reasonable standard than the one adopted by the court, that interpretation would be binding at least as a gloss on the earlier treaty. The United States has never seriously pushed back against the EU. Now is the time. An incoming president should ask for an immediate study of the implementation of Executive Order 14086 and suspend any provisions that unduly burden intelligence collection. At the same time, in negotiation with the Europeans, the United States should make clear that the continued sharing of intelligence with the EU member states depends on successful resolution of this issue within the first 2 years of a president's term. It is time for a real solution, not the 30 years of stopgaps imposed by Brussels. The President's Daily Brief, PDB. An incoming conservative president should make clear what the President's Daily Brief is and is not. The PDB should be for the President specifically, with a much narrower distribution and addressing areas of strategic concern. During the transition, the future National Security Advisor, along with the DNI, should conduct a review of current PDB recipients and determine which should remain recipients when the President's term begins. Instead of being used as the statement of record for the agencies, the PDB often misses the areas of interest for presidents and their senior advisors. The President should want the PDB to focus on providing the information needed for the often imperfect and complex decisions that a president needs to make, which should always be based on the best intelligence that can be gathered. Where consensus and agreement are possible, an IC-coordinated product is excellent, but insights provided by properly channeled dissent can lead a president to ask relevant questions of his DNI and IC. A future DNI determines the PDB briefer based on recommendations made by the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Mission Integration, MI. Historically, briefers have come from the CIA, but a future president and DNI should consider a primary briefer or a rotation of briefers from other IC elements. Additionally, the entirety of the PDB staff and production should be located at ODNI. National Intelligence Council, NIC. The National Intelligence Council is the IC's premier analytical organization and includes more than a dozen national intelligence officers, NIOs, each of whom leads the IC's analysis within a regional, China, Russia, Iran, or functional, cyber, counter-proliferation economics mission area. This includes authoring national intelligence estimates on major strategic issues within the entire IC, overseeing and deconflicting the annual analytic plans of each agency, and weighing in on the day-to-day major analytical issues, sometimes individually. For example, by writing the NIC's strategic memos or providing detailed expert briefings to the President before major decisions. Historically part of the CIA, the NIC was reorganized into the ODNI, as was the PDB. It retains the CIA's objective analytic culture and is staffed primarily with CIA officers. However, as many as 25% of its NIOs over the decades have come from academia or the private sector, bringing in much needed outside expertise to collate and understand intelligence with perspective and skills that are not necessarily nurtured within the IC. In recent years, there has been a greater emphasis on encouraging officers from other agencies, particularly the DIA, NSA, and FBI, to serve as NIOs or as their deputies. To encourage greater analytic independence and debate, the incoming administration should require that non CIA officers comprise at least 50% of the NIC's membership and that the first among equals NIC chairman is an outsider from one of the three major IC agencies with reporting responsibility to the PDD&I. Opening these senior analytic roles to the best analysts regardless of agency would also encourage the continued maturation of analytic cadres and tradecraft at those agencies, and give them an equal voice in interagency analytical disputes, which in turn would give the President access to the best thinking and a variety of sources and perspectives from across the entire IC rather than from the CIA alone. The IC Chief Information Officer. The Intelligence Chief Information Officer, ICCIO, directs and oversees all aspects of the classified IT budget for all of the IC's 18 elements. As the DNI's principal advisor for technology, the ICCIO must be well versed in technology acquisitions, operations, and interagency cooperation to advance our technical prowess and simultaneously direct a bureaucracy that, left unchecked, will serve each element's own preferences. To ensure that procured and implemented technology and policy reflect the administration's agenda, the ICCIO must have the support of the DNI and possess the ability to command cooperation between and promote interoperability across IC members. Because of the unique responsibilities entrusted to this position, incumbency has seesawed between political appointees and career civilians. Due to its congressionally capped salary, the position is often filled by an SES level member, administratively detailed to support the DNI. At times, the ICCIO is incorrectly referred to as the ODNI CIO by law, and to secure unbiased execution across all of the IC's 18 elements, the same individual may not serve as ICCIO and ODNI CIO. They are two distinct positions. Critical areas and the ICIT portfolio's priorities for the ICCIO include, but are not limited to, transparent accounting and allocation of IT investments across the IC, including commercial cloud computing and storage, recognized and uniform security access for people, systems, and capabilities to enable interoperability across IC elements, 5G, 6G data transmission, and network interoperability, which is vital to IC element operations, artificial intelligence and machine learning, quantum cryptology and cryptography, and post-quantum encryption, PQE, and cybersecurity infrastructure, where Biden administration changes have realigned and reassigned management oversight and IT architecture responsibilities to NSA and DHS, CISA, conflicting with ICCIO delineated roles. An incoming administration should appoint the ICCIO as a primary member of the DNI staff, along with the ODNI General Counsel, IC Chief Financial Officer, and ODNI Chief Operating Officer. The President-elect should require immediate reviews of the progress in implementing post-quantum encryption at a minimum for IC and defense systems, but preferably throughout the government. The President's National Security Memorandum specifying The goal of mitigating as much of the quantum risk as is feasible by 2035 needs to be revised in light of the magnitude of the threat, accounting for the investment that will be needed to secure IT systems for national security should be a top priority. ODNI, CIA, and IC technology issues. In recent years, the IC has had a mandate from multiple administrations to advance technology needs for intelligence, needs that have seen massive changes as a result of such threats as China's advancements in technology and data infrastructure. Many of the projects coming out of ODNI and CIA's Science and Technology Directorate, S&T, focus on expensive AI-driven open source work, but there is likely duplication of effort in areas where the private sector and entrepreneurs are already making progress. The Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Activity, IARPA, and S&T should focus primarily on challenging technology problems, avoiding duplication of what is already being done well in the private sector, as well as such areas as practical defense, cyber intelligence, and artificial intelligence research would help to focus the agency on the complex shadow task at hand, while simultaneously freeing limited resources for advancement in other areas. President's Intelligence Advisory Board and PIAB Intelligence Oversight Board. The President's Intelligence Advisory Board is charged with providing the President with an independent source of advice for the IC's effectiveness, while offering insights into the IC's future plans. The board is meant to have access to all information needed to perform its functions and to have direct access to the President. The Intelligence Oversight Board is a standing committee within the PIAB. These entities should be tasked with giving independent, informed advice and opinion concerning major matters of national security focused on long-term, enduring issues central to advancing and protecting American interests. This should include taking a broader, deeper look at critical trends, developments, and their implications for U.S. national and economic security, relying on unclassified and open source information. The importance of space. With China developing increasingly capable space and counter space technologies, and Russia taking more aggressive action in space, space has emerged as the latest warfighting domain. In response, the DNI created the Office of Space Executive, OSX, in 2018 as an experiment to promote greater integration of IC space activities without incurring excessive overhead. The DNI mandated greater collaboration across the enterprise without adding personnel, alerting authorities, and increasing budgets. The Space Executive's design reflects the original design principles of the ODNI. The ODNI was explicitly not designed to be a departmental headquarters with command and control of the 18 agencies' vast bureaucracies. Rather, it was designed to be small and lightweight, with a mission to coordinate and integrate the critical activities of the IC's 18 agencies without creating new bureaucracy. That goal should remain in force, and calls by outside entities or Congress to add new centers and layers should be rejected. The Office of Space Executive has been recognized as an effective governance model and has spawned similar efforts, including the Election Threats Executive, Economic and Threat Finance Executive, and Cyber Executive. With this in mind, the following initiatives should be pursued. Expand collaboration with partners. For too many decades, the IC and DoD have acquired and operated satellites independently. To improve their ability to meet the threat posed by China and Russia, the IC and DoD should explore new methods for better integrating our space assets, examine the possibility of joint programs, and fully utilize unique Title 10 and Title 50 authorities to execute space defense and offense strategies jointly. Additionally, The IC should support building international alliances with like-minded partners beyond the Five Eyes intelligence sharing nations. Increasingly, potential allied nations and their commercial companies are developing innovative space capabilities to augment and strengthen the U.S. space defense and intelligence posture. Refocus space related intelligence collection. The IC has developed a space threats collection posture predicated on three assumptions. The best information on developing space threats comes from a collection against the adversary's military institutions on Earth. There should be a clear dividing line between DoD's intelligence activities and the IC's, and and only government developed exquisite capabilities can inform threat analysis and decision making effectively. Developments by our adversaries and the emergence of a vibrant commercial space marketplace over the past decade have rendered all three assumptions false and even dangerous. The IC must therefore refocus and invest in methods that will enable it to characterize accurately the threats that already exist in space, not just on the ground. Break down barriers to information sharing and collaboration with the DoD, and embrace commercially derived capabilities that can be adapted to a national security mission, all while emphasizing the need to protect critical supply chains and cybersecurity needs that result from increasingly government commercial low Earth orbit. Our nation's economic and national security depend on being able to advance America's leadership position in space, which is eroding in the face of increasing threats from adversaries and our own inaction. All right. An unfinished experiment. I don't have anything to add. The intelligence community, including specifically the role of DNI and ODNI, is an unfinished experiment. The envisioned design principle was a conservative one, a small network-centric model for enterprise coordination as opposed to a large monolithic bureaucracy like DHS. The ODNI, however, has reverted in some ways to a bureaucratic and hierarchical model characterized by limited effectiveness. Historically, the CIA has undercut the DNI and maintains primacy in the IC hierarchy, especially regarding the White House. An incoming conservative president can right the ship and return the IC governance model to first principles by using a limited but empowered leadership and coordination designed to serve the nation's intelligence and national security needs while reclaiming the public trust with fiscal responsibility, political neutrality, personnel accountability, technological prowess, and necessary human capital needed to counter the immense nation state and asymmetrical threats facing our country. And so ends this section. I didn't have a whole lot to add to most of that, and I quit trying to do it for the timestamps alone. I just won't. We need to be very clear that I understand spying is a necessary thing, but we need to be very careful that it is not taking advantage of our domestic people in any way, that it is fully transparent at least to someone's, like not just a person, but many people. All of them cleared, all of them with the knowledge and the ability to keep secrets, but being held to account. What happened with the FISA courts in the 2016 election is an absolute travesty. Like absolute legal travesty. That there has been no punishment for that is another absolute travesty of justice. We should hold these people to the highest level of accountability. If you are responsible for the highest amount of responsibility, you should be highly held accountable for your actions, period. Fully, period. It should be severe, period. And that's where we're going to wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of topics. I try not to interject where I don't have the knowledge or I don't have anything positive to add to it, right? It wouldn't be me doing anything but merely speculating and making it another 20 minutes long. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know where you agree. Let me know where you don't. I am here for the discussion as long as you keep it civil. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with the super things. It will be greatly appreciated. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.